Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ, and welcome to Future Friday. Hello, all. For those who do not know, this show is a long-form content program Monday through Friday, and especially here on Future Friday, we end after we take all week talking about our particular subject and focus. And this week's subject is limitations and micro worlds. And I thought we would take a look at this because, as a general definition, the idea is we take our role playing game of choice, tabletop role playing game, and we pull out some mechanics. We find something in the game, and then we narrow our focus into that particular arena, both from a narrative standpoint and a mechanical standpoint. And of course, during the rest of the week, we talked about fantasy RPG gaming and some of the either underutilized rules or modifications to it, or maybe we have certain locations that we want to delve into. But I stayed away quite a bit from the science fiction part of this. Now, for those who don't know, on this Future Friday, not only do we talk about science fiction, but we also tend to focus more into transhumanism as relates to tabletop RPG games, especially games and settings like The Expanse, Eclipse Phase, Altered Carbon, Transhuman Space, et cetera, et cetera. So, of course, the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about limitations and micro worlds, of course, is the literal idea of, I don't know, going to another world, right? And another world could be another location, whether it's a far off asteroid or orbiting around a gas giant or any number of other planetary sources. Now, Eclipse Phase tends to focus on our own solar system, but because of the addition of the Pandora gates into that setting, you can walk through a Pandora gate and be darn near anywhere. And they have quite a number of exoplanets out there in the wild, and of course those exoplanets and our own science has let us know that there are many types of planetary conditions that you may want to insert your player characters into. And so just from our own science, we have plenty of micro worlds that you might want to use as a one-off for your games, whether it's the player characters must sleeve into aquatic morphs and dive into the deep ocean of Europa, or get into they are assigned synthmorphs and they must navigate the clanking masses down in the airless hallways of Luna. Or hey, hey there, legally blind there, well, thank you for joining. Maybe the player characters must I don't know, get into some sort of acidic resistant flying or gliding morph or something in the upper atmosphere of Venus or what have you. So scientifically, yeah, there's plenty of micro worlds in science fiction. As a matter of fact, if we pull on the threads of Star Wars, we have the mono environmental planets in the Star Wars realm. You've got a jungle planet and desert planet and an ice planet and things like that. And despite the fact that it may not fit very well in our own knowledge of how planets are, that may be a thing in your setting if you don't want to get too hit. Yep, Dead Man says volcano planets, absolutely. And as we know, we're not limited to one type of volcanic type of activity, right? There's cryovolcanoes. There are the surface of Venus is supposed to be so highly volcanic that the region itself changes, so you can't even really map it. It's so volcanically active. And the sources of the volcanism could be any number of things. It could be spewing methane gas. It could be spewing out like all kind of ammonia and all those kind of things. Now my mind went to Titan, a realm with a poisonous atmosphere and poisonous fluids on its surface and absolutely positively frigid. So we have a lot of micro worlds in a physical sense. Now, um, away from those micro worlds and because I didn't want to focus too much on the natural habitats because we can talk about that as its own subject probably one of these days. But I wanted to fall even into space habitats, right? Even habitats themselves come in such a myriad shape and design that they can become their own like one-offs if you want to have use this in your game. Like for example, um, a habitat that's very not used very often, but is pretty interesting, is the idea of a giant-sized geodesic, essentially a big giant ball that has spurs or rods or structural integrity that holds the ball rigid, and then the people that live inside the geodesic attach their havens to the spurs, and then the spurs are used for travel and energy and security, maybe even oxygen. And so everyone that you can insert your particular habitat inside of the very larger habitat. Like that's a really different one. But exploring a place like that with its 360-degree realm where you have a number of different habitats all linked inside of these I don't know what you call them, like corridors. No, I'm not using the correct description for the image that I'm thinking of, but even that's a strange type of habitat you could use and incorporate into your games and such. Deadman says the ultra dense atmosphere causes a reverse curvature of apparent horizon. The horizon looking like it's above you. Oh, yes, the um, a trait that we take for granted on Earth is the fact that the density of our own atmosphere allows us to, and I'm going to air quote, see the horizon in a particular manner, right? And that's due to light waves being, from our eyes being able to perceive where the horizon is. But if the atmosphere is so dense, it will flip our perception of where the horizon is because of the way we perceive light, and that would be so strange to know that you're standing on the ground and you look far away and you're like, oh, where's the horizon? And the horizon's like upside down, and what? Oh man, I can't imagine. I love it and then fear it all at the same time. So Dead Man says, like Locust in Saturn's Trojans. Yes, the idea of bringing together Locust is a space habitat, and one of the most gonzo versions of something like Locust would be, say, uh, the movie Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, where you just keep getting this collection of more and more starships, spaceships collecting together in this like hodgepodge that becomes its own haven, and all the aliens are living on it in their own, like they all have their own, like there's an aquatic world section, and there's like maybe a heavy radiation section or something, or a light gravity section. Oh, there's a heavy gravity section. Like, sure, it might be a little bit strange if you want to go far more hard science fiction, but it's possible. Of course, we have our simple habitats, dome habitats. We have hive habitats without gravity, so that they're just hives, meaning like um, think like anthills or beehives or something like that, where there is no up or down. It's just a bunch of like corridors and rooms and things like that. Even light gravity worlds with habitats would have, maybe, for example, on our own moon, if we take a crater and dome the moon over, maybe there are people who like to hang glide inside of the place or free run inside of the dome because there's oxygen now, but the gravity hasn't changed. So you might have like, I don't know, there could be some like disruptive kids or something, like, jumping dozens or even hundreds of meters from one place to another, and the people that live there are like, you damn kids, get off my hydroponic lawn. I don't know. But two things that come to mind for me when it comes to micro worlds, and this is where not just the narrative, but the mechanical effects of it could really start to change a bit. One of them, I'm going to go very alien, and the other one, I'm going to come back to humanity. So let's go out into our alien worlds. And that is that the PCs might go to a place where the rules of interaction might not be explained, but they may try to understand what the side effects of those rules are. Let me give you an example. It could be players arrive on an alien planet and the star that they're near sends out solar flares that are so powerful, it causes an EMP effect every 7 minutes and 38 seconds, right? So the EMP goes out and woof, and all of a sudden you just radiation or the electromagnetic pulse leaves the local sun, blasts over the planet and shuts down all electronics. And all of a sudden everything starts to reboot and everything. the synthetics in the player characters playing synthetic characters pass out. Maybe even the biomorph characters, their cortical stacks end up rebooting, and they wake up and their head hurts and they're like, what the hell just happened? And then you come to find out it was an EMP pulse. And they go, oh, that was strange. And then it happens again. And then it happens again. And then it happens again. And the PCs are like, what the hell's going on? And they're like, well, according to our records, every 7 minutes and 38 seconds, there's an electromagnetic pulse. Now, sure, that might be a little bit inconvenient to some extent, unless, of course, you're in the middle of, say, oh, I don't know, a running gun battle, or there's some kind of energy core that you need to remove off the planet, or you're trying to download very sensitive information, but every time the electromagnetic pulse comes through, you have to start all over again. And, like maybe there's something alien, something unexplained as to why it's happening, but you don't understand. You don't know why it's happening, but you understand the side effects of the thing happening in the first place. Radiation pulses, electromagnetic energy, communications shutting down, strange energy drains like batteries and things like that start to go out. Maybe there's some kind of energy flux where things start to overload, or information starts to become, I don't know, you think you can read it, but now it's in some kind of alien language for some strange random reason or something, right? And like Deadman pointed out, our perceptions might change based simply on the science of the materials around us. Maybe sound starts to become strange and odd. Maybe our own vision starts to change. Maybe our ability to feel and smell things starts to become very odd itself. For example, and this one's a little bit funny. For example, I believe there's deep sea divers are able to use, and I'm pulling this out of my ass right now, helium to allow them to dive ever deeper into the high pressures of the ocean, but I think they have to use like helium or something to allow them to survive the pressures. But then when they start to speak, you know how you people will breathe in from a balloon and they get that high pitched voice. The high pitch of the voice gets so high they actually need to use throat modulators to communicate because you can't even understand what the other person is saying. I know that's a weirdism, but maybe there is something like that. Um, the legally blind lurker says a hollow planet, maybe civilization is on the inside of the surface, which might be a thing, right? That brings up what, like a Dyson sphere. You know, you go to a star. One of the Next Generation episodes went into a Dyson sphere, or like you said, a hollow world. Who built it? Why does it exist? What's in the hollow world? Are the This is an extremely common trope. Alien civilization built something, and they're gone, and we're poking and prodding our way through it. This The fourth season of The Expanse dealt a lot with, well, The Expanse dealt has each season has dealt with an alien incursion of something, some kind of debris or technology or something from aliens, and how it has manipulated our own politics and such. And in the fourth season of The Expanse, they literally go to an alien planet. Spoiler alert, and unexplained activities happen there. So this might be a great time to insert, like, if your players are of the cyberpunk ilk, right, the Shadowrun ilk, where they're like, oh, we just want to run and gun, but your players and yourself are like looking for something new and different. Maybe this might be the thing. Going to a micro world, a one-off world, a location where the rules have changed a bit, might be a great idea. Even in a situation where the players really do want to just run and gun all over the place, they might discover something that's strange. Like Deadman says, the novel Sphere used the helium technique with the main characters cracking up big time from the sound change. Yeah. It hasn't been too long ago I listened to the audiobook. Yeah, in the novel Sphere, and mind you, this is like a a double micro world, right? So for those who don't know, there is a movie called Sphere based on a book, and something strange is down in the deep ocean, and a number of scientists and military personnel are called to go there. Oh, all right, Omen. Hey, man, have a great one. I know. Hey, real life it takes precedent over listening to this strange talking head. But in the book Sphere, the main characters have to go down into the deep ocean to a depth that is rarely explored. So they are in a location where the rules of everything have changed, right? They have to breathe in helium, and the helium helps them survive the deep, suffering from extreme pressure in the bends, and the helium is making them have that high pitched talk, and like Deadman says, they start cracking up each other just simply because of how they're speaking, and so they have to use like a throat modulator that converts the sound down back to something normal that we can all understand. And now, mind you, that might seem like something minor until the player characters are unable to communicate with each other. This technique was used in the Expanse when two characters needed to communicate with each other and not broadcast to everyone else on the ship. What did they do? They turned off their communicators, put their helmets together in a vacuum, and the sound was able to because sound is just vibrations through material, right? When our voices carry by having sound vibrations that go through the air molecules. So they put their helmets together and they could actually talk. It was a little muffled, of course, but they were able to talk to each other by simply putting their, plastic to plastic or whatever the material is, helmets are made out of, and able to communicate with each other without having to use radios. And so, while minor, it's a little thing, one off. That might be a really great story element or detail you want to put into your game. And the only way you get there is having these little, what I'm calling limitations and micro worlds, where, hey guys, oh, by the way, you're down in the deep frigid oceans of Europa, so you're underwater, and there's probably a good 60 miles of deep ocean. How are you going to talk to each other? Well, I just send them a message. And you're like, your radios are out. You're in radio silence. What are you going to do? Oh wow. How how about hand signals? Do we have some kind of like Morse code sign language hand signal thing? I don't know. Do you? Let's make a roll. Let's figure this out, right? That might be the thing. Now, the other part of Sphere was that they found an alien artifact, and the alien artifact had um, they didn't realize, and of course, the whole book is they didn't realize that, spoiler alert, it had an effect by physically manifesting the subconscious thoughts of those around it. Uh, and so, yep. Um, the Tesla brings up winged humans on the moon, right? That's which is a possibility. I brought up like people with glider capes or something, flying around. The only reason you could have winged humans on the moon in our in our scientific manipulation of it would be doming over areas on a light gravity world, filling it with oxygen or oxygen nitrogen combinations and stuff. And so the light gravity would allow us to like have glider capes or maybe even ornithopters, possibly. And of course, of course, the ultimate would be like free running in a place like that. Hell, my old ass would be wanting to free run too. It would feel so cool. Um, Yep, Dead Man says Eclipse Phase has the Venusian glider morph in the first edition. Um, Venus, despite having a like a sulfuric acid type of gaseous atmosphere, there is there's a theory that you could float a habitat in the upper atmosphere of Venus because the oxygen would be lighter than the gaseous clouds around Venus. I'm describing it terribly. But the long story short is that you can have an aerostat, and maybe the player characters have to visit an aerostat. And it may be possible or even necessary for them to use like a winged morph, a body, you basically a biological body, although they're mechanical bodies too, that have wings on them and allow them to float from maybe one aerostat to another, or maybe they have to do some kind of like espionage thing where they have to walk on the skin on the outer portion of the aerostat to get from one place to another, or maybe they join some kind of like sporting event where they deep dive into the acidic clouds around Venus before and preventing themselves from falling into the gravity well and then getting burnt up and melted by the heavy the super hot greenhouse effect of Venus itself, right? So, but as my mind's going crazy because I'm thinking of all of the planets, not just in our own solar system, but how you could pick and choose different types of planetary elements and then use that to have something happen. I mean, why have why do we need to stick to earth-based alleyways and people running down those alleyways with cyber-linked chain guns and rail guns and stuff? Why not have those same things happen on the zero gravity skin of a spindle habitat floating around Neptune, or having a run and gun fight on the outer skin of a space elevator, that's I don't know, been half decommissioned because it led to Earth, and Earth has been devastated in the last war with the Titans, like say from Eclipse Phase or something, or the player characters are in the world of the Expanse and they've gone through the ring. For those who don't know, there was a ring, and that ring, when you went through that ring, opened up to like, what was it, 1,300 other ring destinations, and then who knows how many other planetary surfaces there are after you go through those rings. And so, maybe the player characters, they have to make a deal with someone, but that person's like, I'm super paranoid and I'm only going to make a deal on this other exoplanet. Or, and of course, there's 1,000 reasons why the players may need to be in a place that disrupts our way of thinking, right? Gravity is a good way to disrupt our way of thinking, meaning like, hey, I've got my railgun and I'm going to fire it in the habitat. And you say, yeah, you might not want to do that in a spindle because the horizon isn't flat. The horizon actually curves up both in front of you and behind you. So yeah, if you fire a firearm, it's absolutely positively going to pierce the skin of the place you're inside of, which brings up the idea of using the PCs maybe needing to get firearms that are not lethal to the habitat itself, like maybe some sort of like electrical discharge weapons or flechette weapons that have like needler weapons that shatter on impact because they're fragile. So maybe they can pierce flesh, but when it comes to like a hard ceramic surface or something, they disintegrate. Or using goo guns like liquid liquid glue or net guns or something that fires out a ball of wire that expands and wraps around a subject and contracts or something. Of course, you have deadly gases and a ton of melee weapons and things like that, grappling, or heck, more than grappling. Could you imagine like two enemies going at each other, like bouncing off of like in zero G, bouncing off the walls, slashing at each other with like mono vibratory katanas or something? I mean, the going into a micro world allows us as game masters to insert like really cinematic regions that might have to make the player characters rethink the way they do things. Like firing any firearm that's got any kind of recoil to it in zero gravity is going to be pretty dangerous without like magnetic boots or Velcro or like being strapped down, because you fire a gun off and the recoil is going to throw you back in an equal and opposite manner. Deadman says Venusian aerostats use higher concentrations of oxygen or O2 to create buoyancy in the CO2 atmosphere. And some of the aerostats use a hard shell, which allows for a lowered atmospheric pressure to allow for flight. Thank you very much there, Deadman. Yeah, I did a terrible description of that. But yes, the oxygen is of a lighter weight than the CO2, and I'm sure plenty of other chemicals, gaseous chemical compounds in the Venusian atmosphere. And so, and then the harder shell allows it, you fill it with oxygen, it basically floats on the the surface of the clouds by maintaining a buoyancy. Now, if you want to go a little bit more like terraform, you could claim that in your particular setting, that a particular range of clouds in the Venusian atmosphere might be breathable. But if you go too high, you might get into thin atmosphere and vacuum. You go too low, you start breathing in the poisonous atmosphere until, of course, it becomes so acidic it burns away your flesh. And so even that kind of hazard might be kind of cool to play with too, especially if the PCs are out there in the naked atmosphere, or they're using some kind of like shuttles or something, and the enemy starts to dive down into the dark clouds, and the PCs are like, "Ooh, how long? How long will the skin on my vessel survive?" And you as the game master are like, "Ooh, I didn't think about that." Die roll, 7 rounds. You're at 70% integrity, and you're like, "Shit, okay, I'm gonna have to shoot him down, shoot the bad guy down or something. But how am I going to get the cortical stack? It's going to fall down into the Venusian atmosphere, and having the PCs think about what and where and how they do things, both using the environment around them and the complications of that environment. For example, no one wants to be near an exposed radioactive reactor in a gunfight, when any kind of projectile that pierces their spacesuit is potentially going to lead to radiation, radiation poisoning, unless, of course, we're playing transhumanists, right? So, you know, the could a cortical stack be irradiated so badly that the person's psychology becomes defragmented or corrupted or something? Possible. Maybe not possible anywhere else, but maybe here, wherever the here is, could be a thing. But I wanted to bring up another aspect, and Dead Man, I want you to challenge me on this because I know I know that you have a particular bent on this, and this is something that is, I think, is underserved in, say, Eclipse phase and maybe even altered carbon. And here's the idea. Um, Not only can we do really strange and wild locations, other planets, um, asteroid belts, rings around worlds, aquatic worlds, volcanic worlds, and things like that. Um, you know, frozen Arctic planets and all that kind of business. But as humanity has spread out, you guys know as well as I do that given the cheapness of the time, energy, and resources to make a world in which you get to live the way you want to, what happens when the PCs go to these different habitats and the way people live in that habitat is completely alien to the player character's way of life? Let me give you an example. Someone very narcissistic could go to have their own habitat, and everyone there is a clone of themselves, right? Oh yeah, you can live here. You just have to look like me, right? Or take that to another extreme. Everyone in the habitat is literally one person, just repeated over and over again. Some are young, some are old, some male, some female, some blended gender in between, but they're all the same person. Or let's go even worse. They all are exactly the same person. It's just one large giant hive mind of dozens, hundreds, thousands of people who are just the same person, same body, copied over and over and over again. Um, we could take literally any and every governmental theorem we have on our planet Earth today and take it and turn the volume way up to 11. I mean, just turn it all the way up and think of the of the worst, most inbred, nasty. Like, okay, here, this one isn't so nasty, but imagine. Well, I do have a nasty one in mind, but okay, how about a community of people that live in a habitat that have no sense of ownership of anything? No one owns any private materials. Maybe they own as many private materials that could fit into a small suitcase. Other than that, there's no private ownership. So when the players arrive, they're like, great, we've got a mission. We know who we're going to hunt down. And all of a sudden, people start walking by and just grab something off their belt or open up the door of their room, in because they're staying there in maybe temporary quarters, and they open up the room and they say, hey, I just need to borrow this, and they just go in, grab it, and start walking out, and the PCs are like, who the hell stole my equipment? Maybe the people here are like, we don't have ownership of anything at all. I can imagine an anarchist's habitat being like that. Let's go even further with that. What if there's no ownership of your memories? Yep. Yeah, Tesla. The Kinderhab. The worst. Hey, if you didn't, everyone who's like, oh my God, I'm so glad we don't have Kenders in our game anymore. And hey, we're playing science fiction, so we're never going to see Kenders ever again. And the game master's like, oh, you don't know. There's thousands of them. And they're all thieves and kleptomaniacs, right? I mean, is it possible? I mean, sure. Is that a little gonzo? Is that a little crazy? Of course, but who's to say that there's a habitat where people act like that? How about we take capitalism to its ultimate extreme, right? When you get in a habitat, you got to pay for the oxygen you breathe. How about that? You have to pay for. Oh, you want to go to level 6? You got to pay for that. Oh, you want to use the what is the turbo lift? You want to use a turbo lift to get to section 567, part A? You're gonna have to pay for that. Um, oh, by the way, um, because you're in the habitat, just by the your mere presence on the habitat is a drain on our resources. So you're gonna have to pay for that as well. Um, Deadman says like a freak, the Africa centric simulation habitat in Uranus's orbit. In Myanus? No, in Uranus orbit. Or Uranus, whatever. Low hanging fruit. He says it's like a VR where everyone has 1 to 4 acres of VR space, only a few dozen synthmorphs to work on the maintenance. Oh, yeah, an entire. Isn't that the a freak is the virtual reality habitat where everyone is basically digital. They're living in virtual spaces, and they live in this virtual like Africa, simulated Africa. I guess you could call it simulated, um, imaginary mythological Africa of like open savanna and jungles and mountains and things. And there's only a few synthmorphs that basically keep the whole thing running. So when the PCs visit the place, it's basically a um, giant sized, what would you call it, data core, basically, with like maybe lots of cooling and solar collectors and probably redundant power sources and a couple of synthmorphs doing maintenance. And the player characters might be like, where is everybody? And then when you insert yourself into the VR realm, you realize there's maybe multitudes, hundreds, thousands, millions, tens of millions, could be billions or trillions even, because it's all digital information, right? So yeah, putting the player characters into places like that. And then my feeling is beyond the micro worlds of going to different solar systems, we could become our own aliens to our own selves, right? Taking the capitalism thing even further, if you guys remember a movie called, I believe it's called Out of Time, where everyone had on their wrist a countdown timer, and the countdown timer was measured. It was counting down from like years, days, weeks, months, moments, minutes, seconds. And the minute your countdown timer went out, you died. That was it. And literally everything was paid for and earned. The entire economy was based on time. And I could imagine a habitat where the people there are hyper focused on, they have decided to embrace the idea that to become a member of society, how valuable are you to the rest of our society if you aren't willing to sacrifice your time to get ahead in life, right? Like you PCs show up, they wake up in their morph, someone comes by, staples their wrist, and they go, ow, what the hell's that? You see 24-hour countdown, and then boop, 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 it starts counting down, and they're like, what the hell is this? And they go, oh, we didn't tell you, you've got 24 hours before your body shuts down, your cortical stack is put into storage, and you're dead, basically, right? And you're like, well, why? What the hell is this about? I'm like, well, you've been talking to me. You've got 23 hours to get your mission done. And maybe the player characters have to run around. Maybe they have to make deals to earn time from someone. Little kid walks up, hey, can you spare a minute? Right? Yep. Yep. Like Rickard says, in before the magic 15 minutes. There you go. Yeah, yeah. 15 minutes of our show, right? But I mean, why? How cool would that be, right? You have a micro world. It's not a world; it's a habitat somewhere. Player characters. You tell the player characters you got 24 hours to get the mission done, and yeah. Like Rickard says, yeah, I might be late, but I'm not missing those 15 minutes. That's where the magic happens, isn't it? I suppose if someone were slick, they could take the channel, chop off the last 15 minutes of every episode, and then turn them into like little snippets or something. That'd be kind of cool. But yeah, the taking, of course, I hinted that there are some, you could get some pretty dark habitats, like, oh, I don't know, the pedophile habitat, right? Which you might want to just blast them out from orbit, take a couple of tungsten rods and just go, yeah, we're not even going to go in there. We're just going to, I won't even be able to scrub out my mind's eye if I go into a place like that. So, but you get my point, where there could be a habitat based around serial killers, Yeah, call in the ion cannon. Yeah, we could just do away with those kind of habitats, right? But there might be certain locations where you really get to have some fun with, and I say fun sarcastically, with how people think and feel. Believe you me, there are billions of people on the planet Earth that if you gave them the time, energy, and resources and location to live the way they want to, you might not want to go there. Or if you went there, you're going like, oh my God, I can't believe someone lives like this. What is it? The documentary about the tigers, right? It's like there's going to be habitats where everyone has some kind of like pod morph or something. There are going to be habitats where like Dead Man says, suitcase antimatter bombs are a thing in Eclipse phase. Sometimes you need to use them. What are those, pedophiles? Yeah. Oh man, I love that gif. Yeah. Boom. Thank you there, Rickard. Sometimes you just need to do that. Yeah, nuke it from orbit. What the hell are we doing here? As expressed in the movie Aliens. Like, yeah, why don't we just nuke the thing from orbit? Of course, that didn't work out the way they wanted to. But again, hell, even now that I think about it, most of the Alien movies were micro worlds where the crew is in a place where the xenomorphs are around, and they've got to deal with it. Heck, maybe there's a corporation that's been working on some kind of morphs, military morphs that got out of hand, and they're very much like xenomorphs. That's funny. Yeah, Rickard's like, why is it that ion cannons and other light-looking weapons always have a delay? It's because we want to see it, dude. It's like, I'm sure, much like we have firearms or like a gun porn. I'm sure in the future we're going to have like laser porn. Like, yeah, it doesn't have to have a delay, but I love it so much. Yeah, ray weapons hits, ray stops 4 seconds later, boom. Yeah, unlike reality where we would probably be blinded before we actually saw the impact. Right? But yeah, you're right, dude. You're so right. Now, um, along with the behavior of people, whether it's a hyper socialist habitat, a hyper capitalist habitat, a hyper communist habitat, and mind you, there's other you could Google in government types, and the bizarreness of that. Remember that the physical nature of the habitat might be strange as well. And when I say physical, I don't mean just the gravity or the oxygen levels and things like that, but even the idea of like, for example, maybe this habitat only has 3 types of morphs. Science lab only has, say, maintenance morphs to make sure the place runs well. Maybe there's like maintenance synthmorphs. Maybe there's only two types of biomorphs for the scientists to engage in their scientific activities. And sure, the players are like, well, what about all my guns, and what about my hyper fury morph with all the boosted reflexes and all that. And you're like, you left that back on Luna. You have to go to this place to have a mission, and there's only three types of morphs. There's one synth morph, two biomorphs. Pick one, right? Even limiting what types of bodies the players are able to operate in and of itself makes a limitation or a micro world that limits your players' capabilities and where and how they're doing something. If we can kind of circle our way back to Europa and an aquatic world, right? Maybe that combat morph isn't going to be appropriately adapted to the place. Maybe there's like, okay, guys, you could pick a merman, a siren, merwoman, and a mechanical deep sea, I don't know, synth morph that looks like a deep sea submarine or something, right? I know, Dead Man, you please tell me. Yeah. So maybe there's a morph that, only lives underwater, and there's only maybe 5 choices, and the player characters have to adapt, mentally and physically adapt to a, 60 plus miles of underwater aquatic realm and the machinations that happen thereof to stop one of those suitcase bombs being placed on a undersea stalactite that's 500 levels that reaches down deep into the frozen aquatic ocean or something, right? Like, there's so many different environments you can put your players in, and using those environments can limit their capabilities, but the limitations are there to create opportunities by just giving the players complications they need to navigate through, right? This isn't shutting the players down and going, well, as a game master, you're like, oh, your characters suck, and I'm just going to force you to do these things. But it's creating a complication. That complication might even be, hey, we're going to insert you into Luna on the moon, and temporarily you're going to have to operate as a synth morph, but your combat morph is in storage somewhere, and you're going to have to find it, right? Deadman says light travels at a speed of 100 million kilometers per second, so you actually can see the beam traveling, though it would take decades to cross interstellar space like the beam weapon in Star Wars The Last Jedi. Is it? Tesla says it's 300,000 kilometers a second. So given a long enough distance, I guess you could see it traveling, which begs the question: if you have a space battle with laser weapons, how far does a laser that's fired that misses travel? Right? Like, is it one of these things where you're like dumping a dead body out in space? Every time you dump a dead body out, you're creating a kinetic kill weapon. Is it the same thing? Mass Effects 2 quote? I did not know that. So yeah, limiting the capabilities of characters, putting them in situations where time is of the essence, that's a great tool to use. Hey, you're in a habitat that's falling into the atmosphere. You've got 7 hours, right? As bits and pieces of the habitat start burning away, maybe the heat starts to increase, the floors start to shift, gravity starts to change, Tesla says you can't see a laser unless it's dispersed slightly by dust or it hits your eye directly. That's right. So I guess you could only see it once it enters an atmosphere, but the thickness of an atmosphere intergalactically is so small, it would just look like a burst, like an explosion rather than a beam, I guess. Hmm. Which is which there are many weapons that might have side effects even that the player characters may not be aware of. For example, what if there are like gamma ray weapons that send off huge bursts of radiation that the player characters might need to deal with? Laser weapons could target the optical nerves of the PCs, and vice versa. The PCs could target the optical nerves of someone else to temporarily blind the PCs, to get away from a particular thing, right? Like there's a way to, I believe there's a way to use like infrared light or laser beams or something to take out cameras to commit crimes and such. So that might be like that might be a necessary mechanical device to use in an espionage type of thing. Or hell, player characters need to extract an agent from an office building on Mars, and with the light gravity, let's say there's an office building that's 300 plus stories tall, and the player characters need to climb the outer skin of the office building, knowing that using any kind of machine, like a some kind of aerodyne vehicle, would get them shot out the sky. So they have to climb up the outer skin of this like office building or something, and maybe like there's a running gun battle as the PCs are like suction cupped to the side of the building, in Mission Impossible: The Burge, and and maybe there's like catwalks that are a mile and a half up in the air, and they're like what is it? The Fifth Element is a movie that comes to mind with a visual where you have, or Coruscant, and the PCs are in giant cities and catwalks and those kind of things. So yeah, that just might be a great way to offer some kind of complications. And basically, long story short, when we get sometimes we like to focus on the combat part of most of our role playing games, right? Who's the bad guy, and roll some dice, and we fight each other, we shoot each other, maybe we grapple each other, throw some martial arts in there, some melee weapons or something. But having those confrontations in strange and unique and bizarre and dynamic locations, I think makes those encounters even better. Sure, having a railgun fight is cool, but doing it with your magnetic boots around the curvature of a spindle habitat falling into the atmosphere of Venus might be just a little bit more cooler, right? And you don't have to do this every single time, but you could do it enough that it becomes memorable and your player characters remember such a thing. Oh, you guys are okay. So Rickard says, "Gunnery chief." Here's a quote: "This recruits as a 20-kilo ferrous slug. Feel the weight. Every 5 seconds, the main gun of an Everest-class dreadnought accelerates 1 to 1.3% of light speed. It impacts with the force of a 38 kiloton bomb. That is 3 times the yield of the city buster dropped on Hiroshima back on Earth. That means Sir Isaac Newton is the deadliest son of a bitch in space." I don't know where I remember that from. "Now, Surfaceman Burnside, what is Newton's first law?" "Sir, an object in motion stays in motion, sir." Yeah, no credit for partial answers, maggot. "Sir, unless acted on by an outside force, sir." Oh man. Uh, I just love I love the whole like, "Sir, yes, sir," kind of thing. Yeah. But it's just pretty ridiculous. I love it. I absolutely love it. Like, yeah, Ogre's like, "Stop him." Anyway, you guys get the point, right? It's like, when we take a look at science, and I love the fact that the Eclipse, wow, the television show. He's like, Rickard's like, "Yeah, you skipped the meat of the quote." Yeah, I did. I did. You're right. Maybe I'll have to eat that sandwich later on. But long story short is that much like the television show The Expanse, instead of ignoring the science, they said, what are the cool things we can pull from the science and incorporate it into the TV show and make it a real thing? Um, is it strange to fire torpedoes through space and it takes 20 minutes before those torpedoes impact your enemy? Sure. But if we take that and embrace that idea and go, yeah, your spacecraft is going to be impacted by torpedoes in 20 minutes, what you've got 20 minutes to say goodbye, right? What do you do to prepare for that kind of impact? Then now you've got something to play with as far as stories go. And so all the things we've been talking about, like Newton's laws of gravity and like the speed of light and poisonous atmospheres and all these kind of things might be the things that, instead of like rolling our eyes and going, oh, I don't know how to incorporate this, we go, okay, if we're going to incorporate this thing, maybe we focus on this one thing. What is the limitation? What kind of obstacle do we have to go through? What kind of complication does this create? And how can we make a story about it, right? Um, Lots of your bad guys, your criminals, are going to want to commit their crimes in locations that other people don't want to be, which is why, the proverbial alleyway is used to commit a crime because, well, very few people want to go down dark alleys, right? And the dark alleys of space might be the heavy radiation around outside of Jupiter. It might be an exoplanet with a poisonous atmosphere, and you found out there's no life there and no mineral resources, so no one wants to go there. It's going to be in a place where an abandoned habitat has an open radiation core, and the only good thing is to let the habitat fall into the atmosphere in the next 3 weeks, right? It's going to be in a place where there's heavy surveillance, and the bad guy knows that the PCs are trying to be quiet, but there's such heavy surveillance that the bad guy knows that they will be alerted when someone tries to backstab them or take them out, and the PCs have to get around the multiple layers of overlapping surveillance in this one particular habitat, right? It might even be, hiding in a crowd. Bad guy goes to a habitat where everyone is a clone of each other and they all look identical. And the bad guy goes there because they know you're going to have to try to find a needle in a haystack. And the PCs get there. And of course, they themselves are one of a number of needles in a pile of other needles, as the only available biomorph is one that looks like everybody else's biomorph, right? Those are complications. Those are micro worlds, one-offs, right? You don't have to have a campaign in a habitat like that, but you could. But you could. Yeah. And as the gunnery sergeant says, damn straight. I dare you. I dare to assume you ignorant jackasses know that space is empty. Once you fire a husk of metal, it keeps going until it hits something. That could be a ship or a planet behind that ship. It might go off into deep space and hit somebody else in 10,000 years. If you pull the trigger on this, you're ruining somebody's day somewhere, sometime, which is my point. Like dumping dead people into space, you're making kinetic kill weapons every time you do that. No one ever brings up that subject, right? No one ever talks about that. But whatever. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining me on this Future Friday. I really appreciate it. By the way, I don't often ask this of you guys, but please like, share, subscribe, follow on Twitch. For those who don't know, and if you've gotten along this long into the broadcast, you should know that this show is TriCast over on Twitch, YouTube, and our own Discord server. So you can partake of the show in any combination of those formats as you wish, and to let others who are out there who would really like to benefit from just being entertained by the show or participating live, please let someone know. And there is a backlog. We've got 800 plus hours of content. We have playlists that have all of our shows. We're getting into, there's double digits in hours of content. So we do have a backlog and archives as well. So guys, everybody have a great one. And I will see thee Monday morning. Bye. Thank you very much for watching. Say goodbye, Kim.